4 planes that have been confirmed as being hijacked over U.S. skies today. Again, 2 crashing into the World Trade Center towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and this last one, you see the debris of it there in the agricultural area, the farming areas, the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. I want to now try to show you some live pictures now of Lower Manhattan at this hour. Again, you still see a thick plume of smoke there. Aaron Brown standing by again in his vantage point on a rooftop in New York City now. Aaron, what are you seeing?
Joey, thank you. We can see, as our viewers can see, the smoke continues to billow out of the Trade Center buildings 6 hours, more than 6 hours after the planes hit. 50,000 people going to work in those buildings. We're joined now on the phone by former Secretary of State James Baker and former Defense Secretary William Cohen. Mr. Baker, let me begin with you. You've been involved in some extraordinary events in the course of your government service. Can you give us any sense at all of what you expect it is like in the Situation Room right now?
Well, I'm sure that it's extraordinarily busy, and it is really a very sorrowful day for our country. We've lost many innocent civilians to what can only be characterized as a very dastardly and cowardly act. A terribly tragic day for America, but I really sense, Aaron, that we may be entering a bit of a new era, an era where we have been worried in the past about terrorism against America. We've always been able to handle it. We obviously were not in a position to handle it today. We do not know all the facts, but we can, I think, suppose and surmise a few things. And one of those is that it took a fairly, I think, sophisticated and complicated planning apparatus to plan and carry out these events.
And Secretary Cohen, not a lot of groups in the world would be capable of this degree of sophistication, would have the financing, the wherewithal to pull this off, would they?
I think that's correct. We don't know at this point exactly which group it is, but there aren't many that would have this degree of sophistication and ability to calibrate it so that you would have nearly simultaneous attacks on 3 important symbols and sites in the United States.
And sir, when we talk about not very many, are we talking about a handful, 3 or 4, a dozen? What do we mean?
I think we're talking about a handful of groups that would have this capability. Again, we don't know all the facts yet in terms of how they were able to gain access to the aircraft, what sort of weapons they had on board. Much of that information hopefully will become forthcoming in the next few weeks. But at this point, we simply have to gather all the information we can to make sure that we can carry out President Bush's vow to hunt down and punish those responsible for this, what Jim Baker just said, dastardly act. There are a few acts in our history that certainly measure up to the magnitude of the loss of life and what it means to this country, and I think that Jim Baker had it right. We're entering a new period, and it's going to cause us to focus our efforts in terms of reconciling what kind of society we can continue to have where we have a persistent threat against innocent civilians in a democratic society. We're going to have to engage in a very constructive and intense debate on how we measure the trade-offs between protecting our people and protecting our civil liberties. And that's a debate that has yet to begin in earnest, but I'm sure that it will.
We now know that the president is in Nebraska, that he is in Sarasota, Florida this morning, where he was to give a speech on education to Louisiana. He's now in Nebraska participating in a national security briefing. Former Secretary of State George Shultz is with us as well. Mr. Secretary, I assume that most of the conversation is going from Washington to the president. What are they telling him, would you guess?
I don't know what we're telling him, but I know how I feel about this. First of all, there has been an act of war of the worst kind, namely against civilians, designed to disrupt and demoralize civilian life, as well as an act of war against the Pentagon. We know that this was carried out by an organization big enough to do something rather complex and complicated. So we have to know who those people are, and we have to go after them, but we have to do more than that. On the one hand, we have to learn what's coming and preempt it, and not be afraid to preempt potential terrorist acts against us. And then we have to look to our own security and give ourselves the kind of reassurance that we deserve, that we're doing the things necessary so we have our children back to our schools, our government officials back in their offices, and these people are not able to stop a resilient, powerful, strong country as we are.
Mr. Schultz, you said we ought not be afraid to preempt it. Have we been afraid to preempt it?
It's hard to preempt. Well, we've done some in the past. It's hard to preempt because you have to know who it is you're going after very clearly and have the right kind of intelligence. But it only underlines the importance of strong intelligence, not only electronic intelligence and photography and so on, but we have to have a very capable human intelligence to know and be able to preempt these sorts of things.
Secretary Cohn, you were in office, if memory serves me correctly, when the Cole was attacked. Obviously, this is a much more horrific event. Did the Cole incident flash back in your mind?
It flashed back in my mind, but also the bombings in East Africa flashed even more vividly before me, because they were, again, nearly simultaneous explosions directed against innocent civilians. And to follow up on Secretary Schultz just mentioned, we indeed did gather together and vow to have the long-arm justice reach out and track those down who are responsible for it, but we also took preemptive action. And that was the basis on our attack in Afghanistan, when we had intelligence that there was to be a gathering.
Well, we're obviously having a lot of crosstalk and a technical problem. We'll sort it out and we'll try and get our guests back. We mentioned a moment ago there were 50,000 people who come to work each day at the World Trade Center. There are literally tens of thousands more who come into the city, each of them affected. But the effect of this, we suspect, is much broader than that it'll affect everyone in the country. Former Secretary of State George Shultz says American life been changed. I know forever seems a bit farther than I want to go, but American life been changed today?
No. American life will pick up. We have to look to our security, obviously, and be careful about it, but we're not going to allow these terrible people to change our way of life. They just aren't going to be able to do it. We defend ourselves adequately. We will find out who they are. We will get rid of them, and we'll learn how to preempt these attacks. But we're not going to change our way of life because of these people. I reject that entirely.
And so we respond, and then people get on airplanes again with the same sense of security that they had before. People go to the Trade Center with the same sense of security they had before.
I'm afraid it'll be a while before they go to the Trade Center. But as far as the use of commercial aircraft are concerned, yes, I think we'll have our aircraft back in operation. We'll have to have tighten and be very careful as people get on these planes, so that we feel secure that we've done everything possible to keep people off who obviously took over a plane. They did it very skillfully. The pilots apparently weren't able to put out any kind of an SOS, and they must have been able to fly the plane. So we're dealing with an organized group. They have to have a safe haven somewhere that allows them to do these things. So let's go after them.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us today. Secretary of State, former Secretary of State George Shultz, James Baker, former Secretary of State as well, and Secretary of the Treasury, and William Cohn, former Senator from Maine and Secretary of Defense. in the Clinton administration, all joining in and all offering similar messages that what happened today cannot be allowed to change the basic core of American life, and that the United States must hold accountable and responsible not simply those who carried out these actions in New York and in Washington, and perhaps another plane as well, the plane that crashed in Pittsburgh, but also any government that has turned a blind eye to terrorist groups, that has offered them safe haven or support, financial, physical support, whatever, that they must be held accountable as well. James Kallstrom, former FBI here in New York, joins us. He's in Delaware. Mr. Kallstrom, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
What are you hearing? Are you hearing things now? Do you have a network of people who are calling in, or that you're calling, who are telling you what they're finding out?
Well, I certainly have a network of friends, and they're busy doing their work, not calling me. The only people calling me right now are the news media.
Okay. What's going through your mind? What are the questions beyond the most obvious? Who did this? What is it that you want to know?
First off, just the immense tragedy of this event and the desire to save as many people as we can save in this terrible, terrible situation. Second thought is that, you know, since '93, with the bombing of the World Trade Center the first time, people that hate us and hate what we stand for and hate our way of life have demonstrated that over and over again. I don't have to go through all the different events, but we all know what they are. And today they've brought that terrible hatred to the United States of America, and we as a country, as a nation, need to stand together. I agree totally with Judge Schultz, who I admire tremendously, that we need to go find out who these people are, and with respect to collateral damage, we need to not let this happen again. And I think this puts about 5 exclamation points on why we in this country need a sophisticated, dedicated, high morale team of intelligence agencies and law enforcement that work together. Not that if it was any better than it was the last 5 years, I'm not saying it wasn't good, but it needs to be the best and continue to be the best.
But you're suggesting it has not been good enough.
Well, in a free society, you know, it's virtually impossible to know everything about every bunch of cowards and crazy people that populate the world, unfortunately. But we need to get as close to that as possible without changing our way of life. And I think that exclamation point just hits home today, and we need to stop this. We need not to change our way of life. We need to find out who did this, and I'll tell you right now, that's a short list of people. And our government knows pretty much what that short list is. They're putting the final touches, I'm sure, and will over the course of the next few hours, next few days, and we need to do something about it.
Sir, thank you for your time today. Appreciate joining. We have shown you a number of times the video of this second plane that at 9:08 hit the Trade Center. We have, I believe, some still pictures of that plane as it moved. I'm seeing them for the first time with you, so bear with us. You can see that in the first shot, the plane approaching the Trade Center. And here in the second frame, you can see in the front, I believe what we saw there was the plumes of smoke and fire from the hit on the first building. The plane now visibly closer to the Trade Center building. It is just the most extraordinary and painful thing to look at, because you know what's happening. Mr. Kallstrom, are you able to see these pictures, by the way? Mr. Kallstrom?
Yes, I am.
Were you able to see those?
I was able to see that, yes.
As you watch that, as you've seen that, I hear the anger builds, doesn't it?
It does. It certainly does build. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's believable.
I mean, we're trained in many ways, both